Moving on to a different set of social issues. Michigan has a high number of homeless individuals, particularly in Wayne and South Oakland counties. Federal statistics show that nearly 70% of all homeless individuals in the United States are military veterans. As governor, how do you think we should go about helping the homeless find housing and basic human rights services such as water, food, and shelter? Mr. McFarland.
This is a difficult issue, and it's difficult because there's a variety of reasons why people are on the streets. String of bad luck, people get into situations economically. A lot of it has to do with the fact that the governments aren't providing a structure where there is enough economic business to employ everyone. So we have to also look at the mentally ill. A lot of the homeless have mental problems that have caused them to be on the street. So there are a variety of issues, and I don't know if I have the answer to it, but government has to do a better job in looking at all of these areas that affect the homeless. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hominick?
Well, there's a variety of problems that contribute to homelessness, and there's no magic answer to solve it. There's a lot of things we can do. I mentioned earlier, we have housing stock sitting rotting on the streets empty, and homeless people. We need to work on moving people into those things. There is two different approaches out there dealing with homelessness, really. There's what's called the needs-based approach and the strength-based approach. The majority of housing agencies out there work with a needs-based, where they say, okay, you're homeless, but you also have a drug problem, or you're alcoholic, or whatever the problem may be. We have to get you treatment and working with that first before we can put you in a home and stable housing. Now, the strength-based approach, and there's an organization called Community Rebuilders out of Grand Rapids. They're not the only one, but they're one of the biggest ones around Michigan, who take the approach of, no, we're going to put people in stable housing first, and then we're going to help them get the help they need with all the other issues they may have. Now, the big difference there is the needs-based approaches. A year later, after placing somebody in stable housing and the needs-based approach, only about 47% of the people are still in stable housing and functioning. And the strength-based approach, over 80% of the people are still in stable housing a year later. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has called the strength-based approach, and specifically Community Rebuilders out of Grand Rapids, one of the best practices in housing. And it's a system that works, and that's one of the ways we need to start with it.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Bazuma.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are very many reasons why people are homeless. One of the reasons, and myself being a veteran, I'm very concerned with the amount of homeless veterans. A lot of homeless veterans need mental care. Right now, they can't get it through our broken VA system. So what happens is they just find when they do get in, somebody gives them a bag full of pills and says, well, you know, come back next month. Private charity works best as far as the homeless, because they're the ones that know what the needs are. Government has a one-size, top-down, fits-all approach. No, that's not right. I wish my government would stop taking so much of my money so I could afford to help more of these agencies that really do help. And as far as the mentally ill, yeah, a mentally ill person can find better care if we throw them in jail or prison than they can anywhere else right now, and that's just not right.
Thank you. Moving on, we're going to talk about gun control now. In the last 4 years, we have seen numerous public shootings at places of education across the country. Debate on the topic of gun control has advanced further than it has in the past, and it seems to only be becoming a hotter issue. Do you support gun control? Why or why not? Mr. McFarland.
This is one of the hallmarks of our campaign. What we're doing is we're pushing for an expansion of open carry. there's really not open carry in Michigan. Sure, you can walk down the street, but you cannot enter your car with it. You would have to have a CPL, a concealed pistol license, to do that. Now, I have a CPL license, but I always open carry. Today, I stopped by the public safety to clear that with them, that I was open carrying, because I open carry to these events. I open carried on the Mackinac Bridge Walk. I open carried in Gaylord High School. I open carried in a mosque recently. I had no problems there. But I did have a problem here at your private university. And I think that is a problem, because what happens is in gun-free zones is that only that criminal will have a gun. Nobody can protect themselves. If you remember Virginia Tech, remember these shootings, remember Columbine. We need security in high schools, state-supported security in high schools, and we need the ability for people to open carry if they're not felons with certain regulations. And the concealed pistol license I would leave alone. If you want to conceal a pistol, then you would go through that process. Thank you.
Mr. Hominick.
Well, I actually believe in all the amendments, including the Second Amendment, but the entire amendment, which says a well-regulated militia, and so allowing, regulation in play. And a lot of gun enthusiasts and owners I've spoken with, who are very conservative in many ways, have said they have no objection to well-thought-out regulation. I think the real issue is the violence in our society. And simply outlawing one weapon is going to simply produce another weapon. Humans are pretty inventive. All right, we've been finding ways to kill ourselves for years. What we have to do is address the alienation that people feel that leads toward violence. We have to address the poverty that people feel that leads toward violence, and all those issues. Reasonable gun control needs to be there, just as we have reasonable laws for speeding and driving and things like that. But let's address the real issue of the violence and not simply a tool.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Bazuma.
I'm a libertarian, so how do you think I feel about the Second Amendment? Yeah, let's make it easy. Let's go after the legal gun owners. What about the illegal gun owners? That's where the violence comes from. And sometimes, yes, there have been incidents, but Paul is right. You have to take a look at what happens in our society. Our inner cities, our war zones right now. You've got police who are playing army, and you have gangs who are armed to the teeth also. One way to end the violence in our inner cities is to end the drug war. Like I said, there's no gun owner who isn't, that uncomfortable with some restriction. But hey, you have to be careful about how much you want the government in. So I wouldn't restrict it any farther. In fact, if the federal government decided to come in and do more federal restrictions of gun rights in Michigan, I would nullify them.
Thank you.
Our next question is about campaign finance reform. Campaign funding is always a debated topic at national and state elections. And then in this midterm election cycle, it is expected that both major parties, meaning the Republicans and Democrats, will have spent nearly $275 million combined. In the state of Michigan, that spending is being seen as well. Rick Snyder will have spent, from numbers that I found online, $150,000 on advertisement. And Mark Schur would nearly have doubled that. Governor Snyder and other state Republican candidates, such as Terry Lynn Land, have been criticized for receiving outside funding, such as $6,800 from New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, as well as other insane amounts of money from other super PACs. Do you think there's an ethical concern with outside money being donated to candidates? Do you support state campaign finance reform? How would you propose about getting money out of politics in the state of Michigan?
It is an ethical concern. I think the super PACs, I think the Supreme Court is dead wrong on this. They're the ones that allow this. I think all campaign financing on a federal, state, and county level should be limited only to individuals and also limited to about $100. That's who should be financing our campaigns, not corporations. The corporations finance these campaigns for the politicians, like Mr. Snyder. His wealthy cronies in the west part of the state, he finances them by giving them tax breaks, and then they shuffle the money back to him. Okay, it's wrong. That is why we are in the situation we're in. But what's interesting is we're witnessing history right now, because right now the polls say we're 45% on the major parties. You're looking at 3 people that will upset this election one way or the other. The math, do the math. So it is very interesting that very little money has been spent here, but we will determine this election.
Mr. Hominick?
We do need to open up the campaign finance. You know, it's amazing as a candidate here, when I file the campaign finance reports, if somebody gives me $100, I have to have their name and their occupation and their employer. A PAC can give millions of dollars and we don't know who it is. You know, they love to give themselves wonderful names like the Committee to Make Michigan Hunky-Dory and Beautiful, you know, when they're really working against all the people of Michigan on that, and you can't find out who's actually backing that. We need more openness in government throughout, and especially in campaign finance reform. One of the best ways we can reform campaigns, though, of any kind, is to take redistricting out of the hands of any party. You know, my ideal there is to take and randomly select 5 people from the jury pools across the state every 10 years, tell them that they can take and use only total population figures. They must redistrict using existing county lines. Where a county is heavily populated and needs to be split, they can only use major east, west, north, south highways to do so. That's going to create districts that are not gerrymandered, where you have a full range of ideals of people, so you're going to have to appeal to that broad center to get elected, and that's going to change a lot of things.
Thank you. Ms. Bizuma?
Let's walk this back just a little bit. Everybody talks about, dark money or any money in political campaigns, but a lot of this is our fault. When we allow our government to grow beyond its constitutional limits and make it do anything and everything, a lot of money and a lot of power is concentrated, not only in Lansing, but also in DC. And there is a lot at stake here. That's why that's why a lot of people try to buy influence in government. If our government didn't try to do what it's not supposed to do, then maybe people wouldn't try to buy influence into the government. Maybe the special interests would just say, hey. Also, too, though, you have to worry not just with the campaigns, but after whoever it is that's elected. Because if you're a person with a lot of money and wants to influence government, you're going to wait to see whoever it is going to be sitting in that office. Yeah, financing campaigns is a crapshoot, but you want to make sure you get that person who's in that office. But like I said before, make government smaller. Stop making it do so much and grab so much power and money, and maybe people wouldn't want to buy so much influence in it.
Thank you. So as a third-party candidate, you must feel some struggle to get equal media attention, and you probably have some difficulties fundraising and competing with the Democrats and the Republicans. So how do you think we can change the way politics are interpreted in the U.S. and the state, and why do you believe that as a third-party candidate, people should vote for you?
Well, I'm a strong believer that people should vote their conscience. It's a media-driven illusion that, if you vote for this third-party candidate, then you're wasting a vote. You're wasting a vote if you don't vote your conscience. If you like the ideals of a person that's running for governor or U.S. Senate, you need to vote for that person. Don't let the media tell you who you'll vote for. Same way with the unions. The unions are telling their union workers to vote for Mark Schauer. those union workers are supporting those union bosses. They need to vote their conscience. So I think that's the most important part.
Mr. Hominick?
Well, I agree. It's been tough with the so-called free press. And, you know, the purpose of the press, and by that I'm including all media, is to help have an informed electorate in a free society. And with the conglomerations that we've allowed and the mergers of so much power and so few hands with the media companies, they want to take, instead of informing the people to make a good choice, they want to inform the people what their choice is. And that's a big difference that can't be allowed. I think that, you know, as a third party, we fight that all the time. Why you should vote for me for governor? Because for the time being, at least, we're going to have either Republicans or Democrats in the state house. With a third party, we get a check and a balance back that we don't have now. Somebody that can say no to whatever comes out of the legislature. Somebody that can say, no, this is a stupid law you're trying to put through, or this is a law that's not fair and equitable to all the citizens of Michigan. I'm going to stop it. And I can veto it. Now, they can work together to override my veto. Great, that's a good thing. They're actually working together again. And, you know, that always wins out in a democracy. You know, you've heard us tonight talk, and we have some very different views on some things, but there's some things we've got very similar views on. And we found that out because we've been willing to talk to each other at these forums and around and work with each other so we can craft some good solutions to some of the problems and let the other ones slide till we get better solutions.
Ms. Bazuma?
It is a problem, being a third party, or what they call a minor party. You do tend to get overlooked. However, I would like to thank some of the media who have contacted me and did request an interview and were interested in what I had to say. Voters deserve a choice. Right now you really don't have much of one. Mark Schauer and Rick Snyder, there's about a dime's worth, well I used to say nickel, but because of inflation I'm going to say dime. There's about a dime's worth of difference between the two of them. So people do need a choice, and that's what we do. And as far as the wasted vote, I agree. You know, if you're going into the poll holding your nose, or you're at home throwing darts against the wall, that's a wasted vote. If you believe in what we're saying, and you want to vote for something instead of against someone, then myself, Paul, or Mark is your guy. Of course, I'm your woman.
We're going on for our final category. We have 2 more questions left until the audience question and answering session. This next question is about the Enbridge oil spill in July of 2010. In July of 2010, the largest inland oil spill in U.S. history occurred right here in Michigan. The Enbridge oil spill dumped between 877,000 and 1 million gallons of crude oil known as tar sands into the Kalamazoo River, large freshwater resource for many in the western side of the state. It is estimated that around 200,000 gallons still remain in the water. The EPA fined Enbridge, a company that reports annual gains of around $13.5 billion, only $3.5 million. Furthermore, Enbridge has a history of oil spills and bursts. Do you support the transportation of oil and other hazardous materials through Michigan's waterways? If a spill occurs during your time as governor, how will you handle this spill?
I think there needs to be proper regulation when you're dealing with any type of environmental issue. Why do we allow the EPA in Michigan to allow Dow Chemical to burn dioxin and to dump it in the river? I don't know. The federal government thinks that's okay to give them a permit to do this. That shouldn't happen. So environmental issues really come first. They even come first over business. If we don't have an environment, sure, we could all have jobs, but if the environment's killing us all, it's not worth it. So environment is paramount. That's very important. How I would handle an oil spill, I would first try to prevent it through these proper regulations. Most of the time, these large chemical companies and oil companies, through their lobbyists, they're writing the legislation. on the federal and state level. They're just handing it to the legislatures and saying, you pass this, and we'll give you money for your campaign. So I think it goes back to lobbying, and it goes back to buying government.
Mr. Hominick.
Well, you know, the 3 million or so Enbridge paid was not even a slap on the wrist for the problems that it caused. And the longer they drag out the cleanup, because they're still not cleaned up, the more and more people tend to forget about it, and they figure they'll be able to get away with not cleaning up as well. It's a cost of doing business, and they need to be able to pay that cost. We have, what is it, Line 5 going across the Straits of Mackinac. They say, well, that's, you know, hasn't had a leak in 55 years. Yeah, but 55 years is time to maybe start taking a look at and doing something different with it. They have more than enough profits coming from that to pay for replacing that line with something that's more secure. We need to be more definite in our regulations and enforce those regulations, and those consequences need to be there, not just a slap on the wrist or less, but some substantial consequences so that you change the attitude and say, hey, we're going to do this right or we're not going to do it at all.
Ms. Buzuma?
Pollution is trespass, and those who trespass have to pay. Right now, though, with our government interfering, a lot of companies don't have to pay that much because liabilities are capped. That is wrong. You cause damage, you pay for it. I believe strongly in private property rights. And you damage somebody's property, you pay the penalty for the cleanup, all of it.
Our final question. Do you support hydrofracking?
No, I don't. I would move the legislature to end that because right now the practice is not environmentally sound. They're pouring chemicals into the ground that are not safe. So this is not good policy. I would move the legislature to end it.
Mr. Hominick?
It needs to be ended. You know, the argument that fracking's been in Michigan since 1952 is true, but it was a straight vertical fracking. The horizontal fracking now, where they're injecting the chemicals in a long way, has been tied definitively by the USGS and other agencies to earthquakes. The earthquakes in Ohio a couple of years ago around Christmas time were directly tied to fracking. Not to mention then the contaminations and poisons that are involved in doing that. So it needs to be stopped, yes.
Ms. Buzuma?
I'm not sure yet. I have problems with the before and the after. The process does use up a lot of water, and water is our greatest resource in Michigan. But then so do a lot of other things. Landscaping, golf courses, cemeteries, college campuses. They use up a lot of water too. Ethanol production uses more water than fracking. So yeah, we have to take a look at a whole approach here. And if we didn't have natural gas, and maybe we can with just vertical as opposed to horizontal, what's the alternative? We keep burning coal. You know how much money we could save in health costs if we did stop burning coal? Natural gas is very clean. There's not a whole lot of emissions there. The problem is, like I said, how to get it. But what are the alternatives? Solar, wind? We're not there yet. And if we do, we're going to have to start looking at decentralizing the grid. So for the time being, if there is a problem, let all parties know about it though. If there's a company that wants to do that and they're going to be horizontally fracking under private property, yeah, then all citizens have to be informed and they all have to weigh in, and maybe they should vote on it, whether they want it or not.
We'd like to move to closing statements. As discussed earlier, closing statements will go in reverse order. So Ms. Buzuma, it'll start with you. You have 2 minutes.
Two whole minutes? Okay. I'm not going to take that long. I'm not a politician here. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran. The reason I am running
is to give people a choice. And I don't have a huge campaign organization. I don't have a whole lot of money, but that's all right, because I'm trying to get an idea out here that there is a difference between a different choice for you between a big spending Democrat and a big spending Republican. How about a smaller spending Libertarian? Or if you like other things, take the Green or the US Taxpayer Party. What I'm trying to say is I've enjoyed, and it's still not over yet, but I've enjoyed doing these things and meeting lots of people. And I will always be grateful to my supporters who have really worked hard for me. What I want to do is this. If I can get enough votes, and hopefully it might make whoever is governor a better governor, because I can get out these ideas. And if I can do that to make either Mark Schauer or Rick Snyder a better governor, I will consider that a victory. Thank you.
Mr. Homnick.
Well, I thank you all for being here tonight. And third parties are important because they become major parties. The Republicans were a third party once upon a time. And the fact of the matter is we need new ideas. And as you've seen here with the three of us, talking to people is so key in any kind of solution. And too often, if you don't talk to each other, then you say, well, we can't solve it because it's too big, so we can't do anything. Truth of the matter is, you can solve a lot of the little parts of it, and the more of those you solve, the smaller the big part becomes, and solutions can be found eventually. And that's what we need to do. There is no such thing as a wasted vote. You've heard that, vote your conscience, but I think it's also important to know that if you're going to waste your vote, if you vote for a Democrat or a Republican who you know are going to do the exact same thing they've been doing for the last 20 years. And so at least give yourself the opportunity, the chance that something new can happen. And with that in mind, I'll stop right there.
I would first like to thank all of you. I think it's important that people participate in this republic, this democracy. I would also like to thank Paul and Mary. Like I said in the beginning statements, I have a lot of respect for them because I know what they've been through. I'm an average citizen, just like you. It's a reflection. My lieutenant governor candidate, he's a service manager at a dealership. We are probably the youngest candidates. I'm 50 and he's 30. He's at the minimum age to run for lieutenant governor or governor. I believe we have some good progressive ideas involving the legalization of cannabis and also opening up open carry. So, you know, we've had some contentious issues here, but I think that when you take a look at all three of us, there's much more agreement. There is a consensus that there are problems within the state. Mr. Snyder is not addressing these problems. Mr. Snyder has been placed into office to take care of his cronies. That's the reality of it. Mr. Schauer, he wants to protect the union bosses. The unions are supporting him. So those are the choices. But vote your conscience. Whoever you vote for who you feel is the best person. Thank you.
This concludes our debate. We thank each of the candidates for taking time out of their busy schedule to be here. Thank you.